I've turned his camera off. Senator Kennedy from Louisiana is recognized.
Madam Secretary, welcome. Mr. Chairman, welcome. Congratulations. Mr. Chairman, I want to start with you. I realize that no one is clairvoyant, but I think it's fair to say that the experts who have been advising you about the future rate of inflation have pretty much the same credibility as those late-night psychic hotlines you see on TV. Is the Fed considering increasing the pace of its tapering? We've got to get control of inflation. It's ravaging our people.
So I think what we missed about inflation was we didn't predict the supply side problems, and those are highly unusual and very difficult, very nonlinear, and it's really hard to predict those things. But that's really what we missed, and that's why all of the professional forecasters had much lower inflation projections. You ask about the taper, and so yes, as I mentioned earlier, since the last meeting, we've seen basically elevated inflation pressures. We've seen very strong labor market data without any improvement in labor supply. And we've seen strong spending data too. So, and remembering that every dollar of asset purchases does increase accommodation, we now look at an economy that's very strong and inflationary pressures that are high. And that means it's appropriate, I think, for us to discuss at our next meeting, which is in a couple of weeks, whether it will be appropriate to wrap up our purchases a few months earlier, as I mentioned.
All right.
But in those 2 weeks, we're going to get more data and we're going to learn more about the new variant.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, you and I don't agree on everything, but I have great respect for your intellect and your experience. And I understand you have a job to do, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out that in my opinion, there is no fair-minded person in the Milky Way who believes the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill are not going to require the American people to incur substantial debt. Now, here's my question. And I'm looking for a number. How much, in the Biden administration's opinion, is too much debt? At what point, as you incur debt, will the Biden administration say, okay, that's it? We can't borrow any more or it's going to hurt the American people?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I disagree with your assessment of Build Back Better. It is fully paid for, or even more than fully paid for, and CBO just completed a comprehensive review of it in which they found essentially the same thing. And I believe it was important that it be fully paid for. Now, I think no single metric is appropriate for evaluating whether or not the level of debt in an economy is reasonable and sustainable. And we're accustomed to looking at debt to GDP ratios and using those kind of metrics and looking around the world. Many economists have found that debt to GDP ratios of 100 or more tend to be associated with significant problems.
Are we at 100 and more?
We are, yeah. But we are in very different times, and that's why it's important to recognize there's no single metric that's right. And especially in a world of very low interest rates, it's appropriate to look at the burden of that debt on society, which is better measured by the real interest burden of the debt. And that is exceptionally low, negative currently, but projected as interest rates normalize to rise to a level.
I'm going to run out of time.
It's still very
let me
moderate.
ask you this, Madam Chair, quickly. You gave a great speech back in September of 2019. It was actually an interview, and I ordered a copy at the time. And I'm trying to find my copy here. You said, this is what you said. I'm going to quote. I thought this was such a wise statement. You said, the former Fed chair said she is not worried about the debt to gross domestic product ratio in the United States right now, but added, and I quote, I'm worried about the trajectory of where it's going. It's not stable. We're not living within our means right now. Debt's going to escalate, and that's going to create problems down the road. But then most important is the demographic wave that lies ahead of us is going to essentially, over the next 30 years, double spending on 3 programs. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid is a share of GDP. And the increases, both because of the aging population and on the healthcare side, medical expenses, those things put us on a trajectory of a completely sustainable budget path. Now, that was when the debt was $17 trillion. It's $29 trillion. You're going to add trillions more through the Build Back Better. Why is that not true today?
Well, I want to repeat again, Build Back Better is fully paid for and will not add to the debt or to deficits.
Right.
And in fact,
You and I
we
just
tend
don't
to
agree on
reduce
that.
it.
I understand.
CBO certainly agrees with what I said. And I mean, we do have problems eventually in financing Medicare and Social Security, which need to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Van Hollen is recognized for 5 minutes from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you for your service. Chairman Powell, congratulations on your renomination. And Secretary Yellen, I really want to pick up just where you left off. I remember 3 years ago in both this committee and the Budget Committee talking about the Republican tax breaks for big corporations. At that time, the Congressional Budget Office did assess that it would add $2 trillion